news now on BBC One with Darren Jordan.
She enriched the life of the nation. Prince Charles salutes the Queen Mother.
She was, quite simply, the most magical grandmother you could possibly have.
Tomorrow, her coffin moves from Windsor to St James's Palace in London. A minute's silence, the sporting community pays tribute across the country. And in Israel, peace protesters are injured as soldiers open fire on the West Bank. Good evening. Panache, style and unswerving dignity. Prince Charles is moving tribute today to the woman he called a most magical grandmother. Speaking at his home at Highgrove, the Prince of Wales said the Queen Mother had meant everything to him and had enriched the life of the nation. Sometimes close to tears, Prince Charles told how he dreaded the moment of her death.
I know what my darling grandmother meant to so many other people. She literally enriched their lives, and she was the original life enhancer, whether publicly or privately, whoever she was with. And in many ways, I think she'd become an institution in her own right, a presence in the nation, and in other realms and territories beyond these shores. At once indomitable, somehow timeless, able to span the generations, wise, loving, with an utterly irresistible mischievousness of spirit, an immensely strong character, combined with a unique natural grace and an infectious optimism about life itself. Above all, though, she understood the British character, and her heart belonged to this ancient old land and its equally indomitable and humorous inhabitants, whom she served with panache, style, and unswerving dignity for very nearly 80 years. I know too what she meant to the whole of my family, particularly to the Queen, for whom she was always such a stalwart and sensitive support, ever since my grandfather died, when he was only 2.5 years older than I am now. And for me, she meant everything. And I had dreaded this moment, along with, I know, countless others. Somehow, I never thought it would come. She seemed gloriously unstoppable. And ever since I was a child, I adored her. Her houses were always filled with an atmosphere of fun, laughter, and affection. And I learned so much from her of immense value in my life. Apart from anything else, she wrote such sparklingly wonderful letters, and her turn of phrase could be utterly memorable. But above all, she saw the funny side of life, and we laughed till we cried. And oh, how I shall miss those laughs. And the wonderful wisdom born of so much experience and of an innate sensitivity to life. She was, quite simply, the most magical grandmother you could possibly have. and I was utterly devoted to her. Her departure has left an irreplaceable chasm in countless lives. But thank God, we are all the richer for the sheer joy of her presence and everything she stood for.
Prince Charles. Well, tonight, gamekeepers from the royal estate are staging a vigil beside the Queen Mother's coffin at Windsor. All day, hundreds of people, old and young, have queued to sign books of condolence and lay floral tributes. Our royal correspondent, Jenny Bond, is there too. Jenny.
Yes, as you can see, it's very quiet here now, but during the course of the day there were quite large crowds, and many of them, I think, shared the Prince's view that someone of great panache and dignity has passed away. They came to pay their last respects to a woman who, in the Prince's words, had an infectious optimism about life. The carpet of flowers outside St George's Chapel, where the Queen Mother will be buried next week, is growing steadily. For the second night, her body lies at rest in the church nearby. Keeping vigil over the grandmother Prince Charles believed was so gloriously unstoppable, 4 gamekeepers from the Windsor estate. Her coffin, draped in her personal standard, rests on an oak trestle flanked by yellow orchids. A short distance away, the Queen and her daughter, the Princess Royal, sought solace with a gentle ride through the park. The Queen is said to be coping stoically. And later, she was at the wheel as, with her nephew and niece, David and Sarah, she spent an hour at her mother's home, Royal Lodge, no doubt thanking the staff who'd looked after her. At noon today, the army paid its tribute to her. London's Hyde Park was one of 11 locations around the UK where 41-gun salutes were fired in her memory. At Edinburgh Castle, a farewell to a woman who took pride in her Scottish roots. In Cardiff, a military mark of respect to someone who'd been Colonel-in-Chief of 15 regiments and had links with many more. And in Belfast, too, the scenes were repeated. Today has also been a time for people to pay their personal tributes. And at Windsor, about 600 people an hour have been queuing to sign the books of condolence. Maria Mockett and her 6-year-old daughter Ciara came up from Surrey to bring their flowers. Tell me why. What made you do this morning?
I think it's just because it is the end of an era and she was such a lovely lady. I suppose everyone thinks of her as their grandmother, and she reminded me of who I used to love very much. So it's just as a mark of respect, really.
And so tonight the arrangements have been made for the Queen Mother's coffin to leave Windsor at midday tomorrow. The next stage of this long final journey will take her to St James's Palace in preparation for the pageantry that will follow. And of course Prince Charles will have a part to play in all that pomp and pageantry, but today, as you saw, he opened his heart in the most remarkable and unstuffy way. We all knew that he and his grandmother were close, but perhaps we didn't realise how very close. To him, as he said, she was quite simply a magical figure and someone with whom he could laugh until he cried. Today we saw tears of a different kind, tears of pure sorrow.
Jenny, thank you very much indeed. This evening, more details have emerged about the arrangements leading up to the Queen Mother's funeral a week tomorrow. It'll be a ceremonial rather than a state occasion. On Friday, the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery will carry the Queen Mother's coffin from St James's Palace to Westminster Hall. Buckingham Palace says the procession will involve 1,600 servicemen and women. Well, let's talk to Nicholas Witchell, who's at the palace now. Nick, what more do we know about the procession from St James's Palace to Westminster Hall?
It will be a very large, a majestic procession, all the details of which were known and approved by the Queen Mother. It will stretch for about half a mile. Representatives of all 15 of the army regiments with which she was associated at ships and air squadrons, and from 4 Commonwealth countries, Australia, Canada, New Zealand and South Africa. When it reaches Westminster Hall, the cortege, the procession will be met by members of both Houses of Parliament. There will then be a short religious service before the lying in state actually begins.
And Nick, as things stand at the moment, it's not a state funeral, is it?
It's not a state funeral, it is a ceremonial royal funeral. It's all about protocol and precedent, and that, of course, is reminiscent of the flag issue at the time of the death of the Diana, Princess of Wales. The palace is watching this very closely. In terms of protocol, it goes like this. In royal circles, you only get a state funeral if you're a head of state. The Queen Mother, of course, was not a head of state, she was the wife of a head of state. Now, this can be resolved, but it requires an initiative by the Houses of Parliament, and it may be felt in some circles that this Queen Consort should receive this ultimate accolade, honour of a state funeral.
Nick, thank you very much. The world of sport has also been paying its tribute to the Queen Mother today. News of that a little bit later in the programme. The other main news tonight is that President Bush has urged Yasser Arafat to denounce Palestinian terror attacks in the hope of ending the cycle of violence in Israel. But almost as he was speaking, a suicide bomber struck in Jerusalem. Earlier, Israeli troops had opened fire on peace protesters in the West Bank, injuring several of the demonstrators, including 3 Britons.
It started out like this. International protesters, Britons among them, on the streets of Bethlehem. No hint of danger yet, and no fear among the protesters.
Obviously there is a risk, and I don't particularly want to get hurt, but I think that life is about risks, and these people, they need us here.
But their peaceful protest ended like this. Israeli troops firing what appeared to be live rounds towards an unarmed crowd. And then the army turned their guns towards us as we filmed.
Okay, we're going, okay!
More gunfire even as we scrambled for our car. Then we were pinned down. In the end, they forced us to go on foot.
Don't shoot!
No more shooting!
We made it to safety, but 7 demonstrators were injured, 3 of them Britons with light shrapnel wounds. And all around Bethlehem today, we found war closing in. These are frightening days in the birthplace of Christ.
Well, the tanks are now moving into position. The last time Israeli forces entered Bethlehem, there was widespread destruction and many dead, civilians among them. Palestinians are expecting the same again. Israel says they have only themselves to blame. If the attacks weren't happening, the tanks wouldn't be here.
But more are arriving every minute. We saw 4-year-old Ala getting her first glimpse and then running away in fear.
Paula, President Bush today urging Yasser Arafat for peace, but also urging restraint from the Israelis as well.
Well, yes, Darren, that statement was a little bit more even-handed than some we've had in the past. But his main demand was still on Yasser Arafat, and he was calling on him to stop the suicide bombings, which have killed more than 70 Israelis in the past month. Now, even as he was speaking, we had another bombing here tonight in Jerusalem, not far from our bureau, in which an Israeli policeman was killed. Now, there was still some pressure from President Bush on the Israelis, telling Ariel Sharon that he had to keep a pathway open for peace. Now, that's not the same as calling for an immediate Israeli withdrawal. It's not a hint that there's a big change in the American position, but it is a signal that America doesn't want to see the chaos and the mayhem here go on forever. What will it mean? I think it will just mean that Israel will speed up its plans and push full speed ahead with this military assault.
Paula, thank you. Here, the BBC's learned tonight that the government will offer teachers a deal that could head off disruption in schools. Britain's biggest teaching union, the NUT, had been threatening industrial action over working hours. But now ministers are planning to offer staff time away from the classroom to prepare lessons.
The 3 6s make? 18. And you've got 9.
Teachers like Samantha Laurie have never before had time set aside for planning and preparing lessons within school hours. Now the government plans to guarantee her up to 5 hours a week preparation time during normal lessons, significantly reducing teachers' spiralling workload.
I do an average of 55 hours a week of work. People think we go in at 9, leave at 3:30. It's just not that way.
Can I see those in favour?
At their annual conference, teachers voted this afternoon to ballot for industrial action.
That is unanimous.
Their demand for a 35-hour week has been rejected as potty by the government. But now the BBC's learned it will offer an historic change to teachers' contracts.
If teachers got guaranteed marking and preparation time, it would be enormously significant. Primary teachers especially really can't work any more hours than they do.
This new proposal could help avert industrial action, but the government wants something in return. It'll expect teachers' lessons to be individually tailored to each pupil, and that, of course, means more work for teachers. James Westhead, BBC News at the NUT conference in Bournemouth.
Now, with news of a change at the top of the Premiership and the rest of the day's sport, here's Mary.
Thanks very much, Darren. Arsenal have taken up the running in the three-club race for the FA Barclaycard Premiership. They took advantage of the fact that neither Liverpool or Manchester United were playing and have gone top. Faced with potentially difficult opposition in the shape of London rivals Charlton, the Gunners kept up their recent form with another 3-0 win. Thierry Henry opened the scoring and went on to grab another. He also had a hand in Freddie Ljungberg's goal, leaving Arsène Wenger's men a point clear at the top. And at the other end of the table, there was an equally important result for Blackburn tonight in their battle against relegation. A Damien Duff solo effort gave them the lead against Southampton, and he also supplied the cross for the second, headed in by Yordi. That win takes Graham Souness's side out of the relegation places. Meanwhile, Leeds slipped up in their chase for a Champions League spot after they lost at Tottenham. It was the second defeat for David O'Leary's side over Easter.
For Leeds United, a season that promised so much is in danger of following Tottenham's up the road to nowhere, and certainly their first-half display at White Hart Lane was pretty aimless. Spurs didn't have to do anything special to create a two-goal lead, Stefan Everson's well-timed leap giving them their first. Their second also owed something to the sloppy defending that's undermined Leeds in recent weeks. The veteran Teddy Sheringham taught them a lesson in reactions. A half-time talking to from David O'Leary produced something like the desired effect, and 6 minutes into the second half, Mark Viduka's pirouette and precise finish got them back in the game. After that, Spurs wobbled for a while, but in the end they held on without too much difficulty. For Leeds, a Champions League place is looking increasingly beyond their grasp. Kevin Geary, BBC News.
Elsewhere, there was a bad loss for John Gregory's Derby, who remain in the bottom three after losing to Middlesbrough. Everton looks safer after beating fellow relegation strugglers Bolton. Fulham are in trouble after losing to West Ham, whilst Ipswich drew with Chelsea. Sunderland beat Leicester, who are all but relegated. England's batsmen face a struggle when play gets underway on the fourth day of the final test against New Zealand in just a few hours' time. Replying to the Kiwis' 202 all-out, England lost Trescothick, Butcher and Hussain in just 6 overs as they struggled to 12 for 3 in their first innings. And there was a minute's silence before the game in Auckland, and the flags flew at half-mast as a mark of respect to the Queen Mother. Across Britain, football stadiums, rugby grounds and racecourses all fell silent, with black armbands worn by players and jockeys.
It's been a day of sporting tributes to the Queen Mother. Everton's game against Bolton, like every other football match played, was preceded by a minute's silence. But since the late 1940s, national hunt racing had been the Queen Mother's sporting passion. She became one of its most successful owners in 1994 when she had her 400th winner. Her love of jump racing never waned.
I'd always wanted to have a horse for steeplechasing. And of course the Queen is very keen on the flat. So I thought I'd just have a horse and see. And of course I got hooked.
Today the Queen Mother was remembered at racecourses across the country. At Towcester in Northamptonshire, jockeys and racegoers paused in memory. The busiest race day of the year has been more subdued than usual. Today has been a chance for racing to pay its respects to one of its most loyal supporters. In Rugby League, the game between Wakefield and Bradford was another fixture to stage an act of remembrance. With the support of the royal family, nothing was cancelled today, but virtually every sporting event in Britain reflected the passing of the Queen Mother. Daniela Ralph, BBC News.
And that's the sports news. Darren.
Mary, thank you very much indeed. Now, a reminder of the main news tonight. Prince Charles's emotional tribute to the Queen Mother. Tomorrow her final journey begins, a voyage that will take her from Windsor Castle to Westminster. A guard of honour is keeping watch over the coffin at the Chapel of All Saints inside Windsor. A vigil beside the woman Prince Charles described as a most magical grandmother. BBC News will have live coverage of the Queen Mother's return to London starting at 12 noon tomorrow here on BBC One and on BBC News 24. But from now, from us, good night.
Good evening to you. Holidaymakers in the Canary Islands certainly haven't done very well this weekend, as you may well have seen on some of the earlier news bulletins. They've had those horrendous floods. Hardly surprising, 224 millimetres of rain, that's about 9 inches or so, and I've got the arithmetic right this time. Many parts of the Mediterranean also suffered from unsettled weather, but we've been pretty warm. We're going to get even warmer. Warm southerly winds coming up during the course of tomorrow. All change there at the end of the week as the winds swing around to the east or the southeast and it gets a good deal colder. So we're going to see it warming up quite dramatically during the course of the next day or two. Temperatures could touch 20 degrees, but then it cools off equally dramatically as we head towards the end of the week. Now, we've had a band of cloud and rain work its way across the country. Clearer weather already into the north and west. That band of cloud, I think, will lurk across the southeastern half for the rest of the night, just here and there giving 1 or 2 spots of rain, but pretty misty and murky. We will find some fog patches developing in many parts of the country as the night wears on. In central and northern areas, it's going to be a cold night with a touch of frost. Under the cloud blanket in the south, temperatures will hold up nicely. Now, eastern parts of the country tomorrow probably will start off grey and murky, maybe the odd spot of drizzle in the southeastern corner. All that'll clear away, and most of the day will be dry and bright with some reasonable spells of hazy sunshine. In the west, even right at the start of the day, could be 1 or 2 showers, but some quite heavy showers working their way northwards during the course of the day. In the southwestern corner, there could well be some thunder before the day's out. But as I said at the beginning, it is going to be very warm, 19, maybe even 20 degrees. Somewhat cooler in the north and west and along that east coast. A very good night to you.